Good morning. Today I'm exposing about the International Monetary Fund, or as well called IMF, and I'm exposing also the roles, the principal objectives of this institution. The IMF is an organization composed by 187 member countries whose dues goes toward funding IMF activities and other United Nations activities. Which are the aims of this institution? These are fostering global monetary cooperation, securing financial stability, facilitating international trade among countries, promoting high employment and sustainable economic growth, which both of them are macroeconomic objectives, and to reduce poverty around the world, which is another important macroeconomic objective that can result as an effect of promoting high employment and sustainable economic growth. And the origins and foundation of the IMF. The IMF was created alongside the World Bank and the GATT, and it's formed in the 1944 in the Bretton Woods Conference, but it came to formal existence in the 1945, a year later, and when the world was finished. It was composed initially with 29 member countries, and the main goal of them was to reconstruct the international payment system. This goal was, the reason for this goal is to because of the countries were coming out of the aftermath, so they trying to reconstruct their economies and political stability. How does it was maintained? The countries contribute to the fund with a poll through a quota system, which countries with payment imbalances can borrow. As I mentioned, how the countries contribute with the quotas, I'm displaying a chart which shows the amount of quota percentage that each country contributes and who pays. Each country's IMF quota determines how much it contributes, how many votes it has, and how much it can borrow. For example, you can show that European Union member states contribute with 32%. This means that they can borrow the same quantity of money that they can contribute. The second country that most contributes with this fund is the United States, which with 17%, and so with other countries. Now we're finding some similarities and differences with the IMF and the World Bank. The similarities are that both institutions are owned by and directed by the governments of member nations. Almost every country on earth is a member of both institutions. Both concern about the economic issues of the countries, and both focus on broadening and strengthening the economies of the member nations. They hold joint annual meetings, and both of them are headquartered in Washington DC in the United States, and they share joint task forces, sessions, and research efforts. As every other institution, the IMF has principles and objectives. I'm going to mention the objectives and the principles as well. To promote international monetary cooperation. It is achieved through a permanent institution with displaced resources available for consultation and collaboration among members to resolve international monetary problems, to facilitate the expansion and balanced growth of international trade, and with this to contribute thereby to maintain a high level of unemployment and sustainable and economic growth, which both of them, as well as you mentioned, are economic objectives, and to promote exchange stability and orderly exchange arrangements among members, and to avoid competitive exchange depreciation. Other objectives are to assist the establishment of multilateral system of payments in respect to current sanctions between members, and with this to eliminate and prohibit the foreign restrictions among countries to permit free trade with the member nations, to give confidence with the members that they can, whenever they want and whenever they are in crisis, to borrow the quantity of money that they needed and that they contributed for solving these economic problems, and to lessen the degree of disequilibrium in international balance of payments of each country, specifically the less developed countries. Well, with this, I'm going to expose the main role of the IMF, which is to monitor the balance of payment situations of member countries, and when necessary, act on behalf of those countries to solve current account problems. As well, each institution has subsidiary roles, which are for the International Monetary Fund, help financing current account deficits of countries around the world, specifically less developed countries or countries which are overcoming political instability problems, and this provide a backstop for many debt crises, help deal with economic crisis by providing international coordination. The activities the IMF mainly perform are economic surveillance. With this, the IMF achieved this goal by producing polls and research efforts in economically and politically speaking for member nations. So each member nation can know in which they are leaking, and so they can strengthen these points. Loans to countries with financial crisis. And the IMF has a global fund of $300 billion, and each member nation can borrow and contribute more with the same amount, the same percentage amount that they have contributed. Technical assistance and economical training, which, as well as I mentioned, the research polls and other to provide the resources and machinery to assist, technically speaking, to each member nation. And now finally I'm going to mention the current roles and activities of the International Monetary Fund, which is, for example, in the period of time 2008-2010, the IMF lent nearly $200 billion. The largest loans are to Romania, Ukraine and Hungary, and in the last activity that they have performed is in 2011 that Ireland agreed to accept an IMF bailout about $85 billion. Well, finally, I have exposed the International Monetary Fund and its roles. So the main role was to monitor the balance of payments of each country, and whenever they wanted to participate in it, so they can resolve these problems. And that's all about the IMF.
Hi, my name is Cristin Rosales, and I'll be answering the question: examine the current roles of the World Bank in promoting economic development. The World Bank was created in Bretton Woods in the same conference that the International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Organization were also created. The purpose of the World Bank is enhancing economic development and structural change. The World Bank functions as a system of economic order that will prevent future economic crises like the Great Depression in 1930. The World Bank is made of 188 countries. The decision making is based on the percentage of shares that a country have of the World Bank. Countries that have a higher percentage of shares have more power into the institution. Currently, the largest voting shares go to USA, Japan, China, Germany, the UK, and France. The World Bank has several objectives. One of them is to provide long-run capital to member countries for economical reconstruction and development. Another objective is to induce long-run capital into member countries for assuring a balance of payments equilibrium. Also, the World Bank provides a guarantee for loans to member countries. They ensure the implementation of development projects, and they promote the investment into member countries. A brief history of the World Bank. The World Bank was created in 1947. The World Bank was created in 1947, and until 1960, the main focus of the World Bank were infrastructure projects. This happened because a lot of countries were devastated due to the World War. So the World Bank gave loans in order for the countries to be rebuilt, increasing the economic growth of the countries. This approach established the financial credibility of the bank, but it also limited its impact on broader projects. In the 1970s and under a new leadership, the focus of the World Bank changed. The main focus were social programs where the World Bank emphasized the meeting of basic needs in the less developed countries. The spending in social programs increased significantly, including healthcare, education, and poverty alleviation. In the 70s, the loans increased significantly, so the new leadership that became in the 80s decided to develop a program that was called the Structural Adjustment Program. The purpose of these programs were to establish significantly restrictive conditions for the granting of new loans. A typical structural adjustment program required the liberalization of exchange rates, capital flows, reduced protectionism, and an open market. The SPAs normally required a cut in the government spending on social welfare in order to pay the loan. These cuts reduced the levels of education, healthcare, and help for the unemployed. These SAPs were very criticized because they were harsh and anti-development in practice because they hurt the most vulnerable groups into the recipient countries. In the 90s, the World Bank responded to the criticism by expanding its focus on lending and assistance activities. Nowadays, the World Bank emphasizes in sustainable development projects instead of pure economic growth. With this vision, the World Bank tries to help the United Nations to fulfill the Millennium Goals. The role of the World Bank has received regular criticism because of the implementation of SAPs in the 80s. So, we will evaluate the most common complaints about the World Bank. The first complaint is conditionality. Conditionality refers to the macroeconomic requirements made by the World Bank before granting a new loan. Conditions are to cut off budget deficit in order to repay the loans, large cuts in social welfare. This hits the most vulnerable groups into the recipient country, affecting the levels of healthcare, education, and health for the unemployed. Another condition is the liberalization of domestic industry and trade, because privatization may cause unemployment because of the lack of resources due to the reduce in the government spending. However, increased foreign competition may cause domestic industries to fault, creating unemployment and suffering. Another aspect is the loss of sovereignty. Loan terms are made by international officials, so the citizens of the borrowing country will start to question the legitimacy of the conditions. Another aspect is the dominance of rich countries. As I explained before, the decision making into the World Bank is based on the percentage of shares a country has. So, the countries that have a higher percentage of the shares are almost all highly developed countries. Based on this, almost all the decisions will be made by them, and those countries know little or in some cases anything about the needs of less developed countries. So the policies will not take into account the needs of those countries. According to several economists, the free market emphasis of the World Bank has led to a rising in the inequality on some recipient countries. The cuts in social welfare has affected several countries into the Human Development Index performance. Large cuts in social welfare has led to a lower performance in the Human Development Index. This is because the countries that receive the loan invest less money in health, education, and poverty alleviation, affecting the overall quality of life into the country. Due to the increased criticism that the World Bank received, it has refocused on a broader array of development issues. Nowadays, the main focus of the World Bank are sustainable development projects that are designed to directly target a specific development goals. These goals include water sanitation incentive, the malaria treatment, AIDS treatment, conservation incentive, and so on. The current goals of the World Bank that are desired to be fulfilled until 2030 are to end extreme poverty by decreasing the amount of people living on less than $1.25 to less than 3%. And also to promote shared prosperity by fostering the income growth of the bottom 30% of each country. Thanks.